What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another exciting episode. Today we're going to be doing more of a discussion video, and it's on a topic that I get asked a lot when I meet a lot of you guys in person, and it's the title of the video. Basically, a lot of you guys will ask me, hey, how often do you really fish swim baits? And the amount of times that you do fish swim baits, why are you doing it? Don't you enjoy other things? And so it's basically today I wanted to kind of discuss about that. Some of you guys will be able to relate to some of the things that I say. Some of you guys will just think I'm absolutely insane, but that's just the way it goes. So if you guys are ready, let's get right into today's video. All right, let's first give a little bit of a backstory that will help kind of explain the reason that I am today. So when I was growing up, I was into conventional fishing. I would fish urban spots and golf courses with just your normal Texas rig, jigs, jerk baits, top water, and stuff like that. And luckily enough, here in Arizona, back then, those golf courses were actually pretty good fishing. You could catch, anywhere from 10 to 30 fish per person on some of these golf courses, but a lot of those fish were pretty small. So we were catching anywhere from like half pounders to like 4 pounders. And so back then, if you caught like a 4 or 5 pounder, that was a pretty giant fish. But you had to weed through a lot of small fish to get to that size of fish. So, doing this for quite a few years and just, this back and forth of just like, man, every time we go fishing, we're always, catching these small fish. And it was fun back then, but it seemed like doing that for many years, it started to kind of wear on me. And once I was getting into high school, I almost kind of got out of bass fishing a little bit because I found out that the tournament bass fishing was not going to be for me. It just wasn't my scene. And then just regular conventional fishing stopped being fun to me. So I was kind of like tiptoeing out of that. And then, one day I'm on Instagram and I see guys like Oliver Nye, Manny Chi, and Mike Gilbert. They're posting up these giant largemouth that they're catching on big swim baits. And so immediately my thought is like, oh, I want to catch fish of that caliber and size. How do I do that? It seems like I should be fishing these bigger swim baits to achieve that goal. So then that's basically when I started fishing swim baits, and this was around like 2012 or so. And immediately going from fishing my conventional stuff to fishing more of the quote unquote bigger swim baits like a G2 shell cracker, an 8-inch triple trout, 6-inch HUDs, 6-inch BBZs, like those types of baits that were, to me, really large baits, and getting results right away that I was looking for, as in I was catching more 3, 4, and 5 pounders than I did before. I was obviously catching less fish, but that was fine for me because the quality of the size of the fish was a lot higher. And back then, it was, even now, swim baits back then was just so different because you're throwing this much larger lure. It's got a different action, and the fish just eat it completely different than, just a worm or a Texas rig on the bottom. So back then, it sparked this interest of like, damn, these swim baits are super cool. And then throughout high school, I would jump from, fishing a lot of swim baits, and then sometimes I would fish just like a jerk bait or a popper and whatnot. But it wasn't until I put down that conventional and I converted into fishing swim baits like 85-90% of the time where I got better at fishing swim baits overall. So that's basically the reason why I fish swim baits. At least one of the reasons why I fish swim baits 95% of the time now is because of just pure enjoyment out of fishing swim baits. And what I have found that swim baits for me, it's not boring at all. When you're fishing a Clash 9, a 250, this thing over here, this Hinkle trout, those are extremely fun baits to fish, whether or not I'm getting a bite or not. Just watching the bait swim and go under docks or under trees or get right by this rock, like, you start to almost have fun with these baits because it's really fun to fish these big swim baits. So the enjoyment factor is always there, whether or not I'm catching fish or not. It's just I'm always constantly doing something that makes me feel like I'm not bored out of my mind. In the early stages, of myself and a lot of guys that I've met and talked to, they got into fishing with a glide bait. Getting into glide bait fishing when you first start fishing swim baits will ruin you so fast, because it's that first instance where you get to watch a bass eat your glide bait. It'll change your life forever. I've talked to so many guys who are like, yeah, I picked up an S-Waver or an Arashi, and my first trip out, I watched this 4 or 5 pound fish come up and eat it and crush it, you know. Sometimes they land the fish, sometimes they don't. Either way, they're completely hooked, because that interaction with that fish and watching this fish just pretty much lose all sight and sense of everything else to come and eat your bait, it's just almost too much for the human mind to comprehend, because it's just National Geographic type stuff where you never get to see that type of stuff with really any conventional. The only thing I could come close to it is like a walking bait when they come up underneath it, or a jerk bait when they follow it. But for the most part, watching these fish eat a lure of this size and you're imparting the action, getting that fish to commit to your lure, is just unbelievable. I mean, I've seen it probably hundreds of times now in my career of watching fish anywhere from 1 pound all the way up to 9 pounds eat a glide bait, and it's just, it never gets old. It's just one of the coolest things to watch. And so that was a huge deciding factor. I'm like, okay, this shit's just way too dope. Like, glide bait fishing is rad. And then, you know, the other opposite side of that is fishing a soft bait. Soft bait, obviously you're not watching it and there's not a whole lot of action on it. You basically just cast it out there and you reel it in. But for me, and I go back and forth with this with my buddy Phoenix, is like, what is better? Is a glide bait bite better or a soft bait bite better? And for me, I always go to a soft bait, just because I don't get as many soft bait bites as I do get on a glide bait. But when it comes down to a soft bait is basically you're firing out there, you can't see it, you have no idea what's going on. It's all about feeling. And once you get in rhythm and tune with a soft bait, whether it be like a Citizen or a Burrito or a Mag or whatever soft bait, once you get in rhythm with it, you almost feel like you're a part of that bait and you're coming through and you know exactly what's going through. It's like, all right, I'm in a rock, I'm coming over a rock. Oh, that's a tree, that's mud, this is sand. And you've really become connected with what's going on without even seeing the bait, but you kind of know what's going on. And then boom, that one time where you're like, oh, you know, I've been running into rocks for weeks on end without getting a bite, but this rock felt different because it went this way instead of this way on my rod. So that bite is almost indescribable on a soft bait. And again, I don't get as many, but just understanding when your bait's down there, there is no confirmation of what you're doing is correct. At least with the glide bait, you can get that confirmation because you'll get followers, you'll get biters. But with the soft bait, it's normally just nothing until you get a bite. And I think that's that anticipation of like, is this the cast that I'll finally get a bite after weeks of fishing a soft bait? So for me, a soft bait's just awesome as well. And you don't even need to see it, and I still think it's just really rad. So that's kind of one of the main reasons why I fish swim baits as much as I do now, and that's just pure enjoyment and just never being bored of fishing these swim baits. The other one is more of a technicality aspect, where when you're doing basically nothing but fishing swim baits, you're able to hone in your craft a lot more efficiently and more consistently when you're fishing swim baits as much as, 95% of the time like I do. So basically what that means is I can pretty much pick up any bait that I have fished for a while and I can fish it. Now, if you guys are into glide bait fishing, you will know not all glide baits swim the same. They have different retrieves. I mean, these over here, these are canines, right? And then you have the Hinkle trout. Those two baits swim completely different. But fishing as much as I do and fishing both of those baits as much as I do, I'm able to, pick up a canine and I fish something super tight, like underneath a tree, or just something super tight like a wall. And then I could just pick up that Hinkle, make a cast accurately into another spot and glide it with the right retrieve. And that's just because I don't throw basically anything else that would hinder my understanding of these larger baits. And what I mean by that is there's guys that will have a deck full of rods, conventional rods, and then maybe a couple swim bait rods. And what they do is they throw conventional maybe to start off with. Then they pick up a swim bait for, about an hour, 2 hours, and then they go back to the worm or whatever conventional that's catching them, and they fish that basically for the rest of the day. You're only giving yourself an hour or 2 hours to hone in your craft with swim bait fishing. And what I mean is, like, if some guy is fishing swim baits, 30% of the time, and a lot of times it is always just the conventional, when it comes down to being able to work the bait right after not fishing it for a few trips, casting accurately in a spot that you need to get bit in, it's going to be a little more difficult when you're not so practiced with it, when you're so used to fishing some of the lighter baits like a spinner bait or a crankbait or a Texas rig or something like that. And it's a night and day difference from fishing a bait that is 5 ounces on an 8-foot rod that's extra heavy to fishing something on a 7-foot medium rod. And so, and it goes back to the retrieve. You have to have the right retrieves. You have to understand all these different things. And so the technicality part of it is that you'll just become a much better swim bait fisherman when you leave the other stuff at home and you only focus on the baits that you want to focus on, the rods, the reels, and all that type of stuff, to better prepare yourself for that opportunity that will eventually come when you're throwing these swim baits. So that's a huge one for me. And I talk to a lot of guys who are fairly good fishermen, even those guys that will stop throwing swim baits for like a month or two and they get back into it, they're a little bit rusty. And some of those times, for whatever reason, the fish gods or the fish, they just know when you're rusty and you're off your game. That's when they come out and give you the opportunity of a lifetime, when you're all messed up and you're like, why would you come out now? Like, how did you know I was gonna mess up this cast or the retrieve or whatever? Like, it's super weird. But I've been trying over the years to eliminate those mistakes so I can have better opportunities at swim bait fishing. Because if you guys know about swim bait fishing, a lot of times if you're fishing pressured water or you're fishing for giant fish, you're only going to have one shot out of maybe the whole year at a true giant. So you almost cannot mess it up. And then the third reason is basically what I just said, and that is just big fish. And I kind of talked about it in the beginning, where I was searching to consistently catch big fish more often than before. And I noticed that when I was, coming up, that I was just so tired of catching those 1 to 3 pounders. And it's all, personal. There's nothing wrong with catching 1 to 3 pound fish. It's just all personal. For me, it felt like I'd caught enough 1 to 3 pounders in my life to be satisfied that I never needed to catch another one. And it's that distinction of, I don't care anymore about getting skunked. I'd rather get skunked than catch smaller fish, because if I'm catching smaller fish, in my mind, it just feels like I wasn't doing the right presentation. I wasn't fishing the right areas where the bigger fish live, because a 2 pounder is not going to act the same way as 8, 9, or 10 pound fish. They're completely different fish, obviously. One's a juvenile and one's an adult. So in my mind, I'd rather just skunk doing it the way that I think can catch a big one, rather than just going out and looking for a bite. And that's pretty hard for a lot of guys that, I talk to and fish with. There's a lot of guys, they just need to get a bite. No matter what it is, they have to catch a fish. They don't want to get skunked. And over the years, I've gone months out. Like, I think my longest streak without catching a fish was maybe 4 months. And yeah, you lose your mind. Obviously, you go 4 months of swim bait fishing and you don't catch a single fish. It's mind numbing, but you realize, like, all right, it's me. I need to do something different, or else it's going to keep happening. And it's those trips that you reflect back on that will just make you a much better fisherman in the long run when it comes down to swim bait fishing. Again, there's nothing wrong with going out there and just getting a bite. But personally, for me, I'm kind of just over that stage. It's not very fun. So getting skunked is literally just a part of the game. That's just what it is. So the days that I don't catch a fish, I chalk it up. I write down notes. I understand, like, all right, why didn't I get a bite today when I got a bite, a week ago? And then you look at different conditions and moon phases and water temperature and all of these different things, that then you can finally become more consistent on figuring out when you will get a bite. And luckily enough for me, I'm very able to pick my days when I want to go fishing way more freely than a lot of guys do. And that's just the luck of the draw that I got with the life that I live. But nowadays, I'm more able to go fishing when I think I'll get a bite rather than me just having to force a bite. And I think that's helped my fishing in the long run without me losing just my absolute mind with just like, all right, these are good conditions. Why am I not getting bit? Oh, it's because of this condition. This one little condition is why I'm not getting a bite. Like, it's just an insane thing. When you start fishing swim baits as much as I do, you'll start to notice that there's certain conditions and certain times that the fish just would rather eat a bigger lure than something smaller. And for sure, I mean, over the years, I've noticed that my size of quality of fish has definitely gone up with fishing these swim baits. This past season was the best season of bass fishing I've ever had. My average size fish was, I believe, an 8 pounder. And so it was an exciting time. It was like the first season where I felt like an accomplished trophy hunter, where everything that I took notes on and wrote down and remembered and all this other thing came together and it worked out really well. And the only reason why I feel like I was able to achieve that is because of the amount of times that I've gone fishing with these swim baits. Because you always, with these swim baits, it's a million times harder to get a bite throwing, something this size than, fishing a worm or something. So you're always constantly having to think of like, all right, when are these fish gonna bite this lure? Where do I need to present it? How do I need to present it? What conditions do they like more? And so overall, fishing these swim baits, I feel like has made me a much better fisherman overall in general, just because of you really have to understand fish behavior and conditions just to get one singular bite on a big swim bait. When I can go out on not so great conditions with a worm or a jig or a crankbait and still catch fish. Not big ones or anything like that, but it's just like the principle of it in my mind is like it's all about trying to catch big fish, and that's the reason why I fish swim baits. If I just wanted to catch fish, I would happily just fish conventional all the time. But it seems like my average size swim bait fish is 5 or 6 pounds instead of a 1 pounder or 2 pounder. And again, I'm not knocking those that love catching that size fish. More power to you. If you're having fun, do whatever you have fun with in fishing. And that's the cool thing about bass fishing, is that there's so many ways we can look at bass fishing, so many different ways we can do it, places to fish them for. Like, there's so many different ways, and as long as you're just going out there and enjoying the sport of bass fishing, it honestly does not matter what you do. But this is just my personal take. I get a lot of questions about it, and hopefully I kind of answered some of those for you guys. If you guys have any other questions about my mentality on bass fishing or with swim baits or whatever, leave a comment down below. If you guys have any other questions or comments, just leave a comment down below. I will get back to them. Other than that, thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, go out there and chase your dreams.